On today's episode of the Story Detective, we've all heard a lot of tips on branding and marketing ourselves and our novels, and yet many writers who have attempted to take conventional advice have not been able to apply it to themselves, have even felt uncomfortable in doing so. That's because a lot of the advice goes against our common decency. Let's be blunt, most of those policies you're resisting are designed by scumbags for other scumbags who drive sales through less than scrupulous means, accompanied with a pressure-filled hard sell. And that's likely not who you are as a creative person, in which case I have great news because as a writer, marketing is a little different than the rest of the world. Today we're going to talk about 3 key aspects, so stick around. When I first started my YouTube channel, I received a lot of interesting advice. Probably you've heard some of the same. Turn up my energy level ×3. Go to certain websites where you can buy subs so you look impressive from the start. Start selling services. And best of all, narrow your focus. Stay in your own lane so people won't get confused. Does any of that sound familiar to you? Don't get me wrong, not all of this advice would be terrible, depending on what you're selling or your target audience, which brings us to our first topic. All marketing is projecting for a future outcome. Your future bestseller breaks down into several smaller projections. Is your story going to be relevant by the time you publish? Is your theme universally timeless? Is the writing itself going for solidity, your own unique voice? Or is it a hodgepodge of authors you're currently reading who are popular? Every artistic endeavor you're working on today is a projection into tomorrow. Designers are most aware of this. It's one of the first things you have to learn in design classes. And your story is a design. It's about human nature. And the good news here is people don't really change. So if your subject and theme have what I like to call an elemental quality, problems and behaviorisms that have been a part of humanity for centuries, your story will be relevant and therefore marketable tomorrow. William Shakespeare wrote all of his plays with elemental themes. The characters and the way in which their greed and lust for power and control over one another become the universal theme has kept his plays alive, even though they were written in another century. There was another big playwright in those days, Christopher Marlowe. His work was extremely well known in the 16th century dramatic Renaissance and is said to have actually influenced Shakespeare. The one difference that's in Marlowe's plays is they were situational, not character-driven. His themes were not elemental. And while everyone has at least heard of Shakespeare today, even if they haven't read his work, the same can't be said for Marlowe. Side note, the next time someone tells you situation is the driving force of fiction, understand this is a newer theory based on popular book sales and not an historical true fact for playwrights and novelists throughout time. So if you're looking for immortality in your writing, run from those who tell you situation rules the day, because situation is good for today, and what's happening today will seem dated tomorrow. Situation does not dictate character. Characters and their personal choices that have made them who they are is why they found themselves in the situation you're writing, and why they are uniquely qualified to be the hero of your story. Let me take a moment to clarify this statement, because I can already hear the horror and science fiction writers saying, wait a minute, without the situation, these genres wouldn't exist. I won't disagree. Although I could certainly make an argument that the monsters and the aliens become characters in their own right, often more important than the human characters. The thing is, you really can't have one without the other. It's the chicken or the egg argument at best. To my way of thinking, situation is definitely the vehicle which moves the plot forward. But without the character making decisions on which direction to steer it, it's going to hit an immovable object and get stuck. More on this in a future video. I recently saw on a live stream a marketer who had become a YouTuber after more than a decade of traditional marketing out there and whatever he was doing in the world. His strategy was to go from one group on YouTube to the next, becoming that charming personality that everyone would fall in love with. In fact, they would like him so much that when he left one YouTube pond, people would just naturally follow him to the next. He bought a bunch of subscribers so that he was over 100,000 subs within a couple of months. When asked about ethics, he said he really had no morals. And he was a self-proclaimed scumbag, and yet was going to build a gigantic platform as a sort of snake oil salesman that everybody would love in spite of all this. How was he going to do this? By making reaction videos. The genius marketer was going to make his fortune on YouTube by becoming the next PewDiePie, who had begun his genius marketing plan doing what he and other established YouTubers attempted several years ago. Are those projections based on solidarity of discovering who he is as a creative personality, or a fad? A fad that has only kind of forwarded itself because of the popularity of those personalities who did it back then and continue to do it. Is it a good idea to bite off of what they're doing now, several years into the whole equation? Projections are nil in this case. Don't get me wrong, it's perfectly okay to be influenced by others. We all are. I believe that type of guerrilla marketing and having people admire you because you're the loudest person vying for attention in the room is probably going to be a bad marketing strategy for the foreseeable future. Why? The world is in flux, or haven't the marketers noticed? And essentially, that means being the asshole or the scumbag is on its way out because everybody is calling everybody else out on the internet, and the cancel culture is trying to wipe one another out. Well, now everybody else is trying to wipe them out. So it probably wouldn't be a good thing to follow those popular YouTubers who have been on top of things and got views because they're edgy, and the fact that they say and do things that they know is wrong. And then every week they're making apology videos. So I don't think that is necessarily going to hold up, at least not in the form that it's in. For most writers, however, every part of this is alien. Writers are introverts. Also, most people who put months or even years into composing a story has some type of moral to tell, meaning that they have some morals. We want to deliver a product with substance, which is a clear sign to every writer and creator that what we do is different from the marketing that's trickled down from corporate America, which brings us to the next subject. We hear a lot about being authentic on social media, creating that aspect of branding that's unique to writers, because the key word in social media is social. For writers who are introverts, it's a ginormous leap to get in front of a camera and start a YouTube channel. For many of us, that question of how we're supposed to present ourselves by marketing standards can be very intimidating. And while you're intimidated, you're required to be intimidating in order to influence your audience. Relax. I'm here to tell you that you can safely disregard all of those intimidation tactics that make you succeed in only being a nervous wreck. I recently read an article in Writer's Digest about this very subject. This article said several interesting things about how writers should build their personal brand, and the main focus was on how to build a rapport with readers. Did you know that in this age of social media in which we're currently living, most readers do not buy books because they see an ad or even an amazing book cover? Those things can definitely help, but current statistics say most people are buying books when they feel connected to a writer that they would like to support. Why? Because when people turn to the creative arts, they want to feel some kind of personal relationship with the creator. They want to know what they stand for. They want to feel that the writer is a real person, in other words. In order to be a successful writer and make sales, you have to share yourself with readers. Does that mean your entire life becomes an open book? Not at all. It means you have to connect with people through your passions. The article went on to give some interesting exercises on how to discover your branding and what you should be talking about. This is especially interesting for building your social media platform, which is where your voice and your passions are portrayed. If you were to look at all the titles you've been currently reading and set down and compose this into a subject, what would that core subject be? Example, if you read mostly YA fantasy, your subject probably revolves around magic, adventure, coming into your own power. If you're mostly reading horror stories, you have a fondness for things that go bump in the night, ghosts, metaphysical, and you probably love Halloween. And those are just some of the topics you could talk about. Think about those things you enjoy doing for those types of stories that you love to read. In other words, think back to when you were a kid, up to around your mid-teens. What did you enjoy back then? What were the things you loved to entertain yourself with? Is there a correlation between those things from early in life and the types of stories that you enjoy in the present? Because if there is, then you have an identifier for where your longtime passions lie. Take a look at that list of books you enjoyed reading back from exercise number 1. Then look at the passions exercise. Do they fuel this particular interest? If you fuse together the types of books that you enjoy, the types of activities you're engaging in, and have, since childhood, maintained these interests, you have the basis for what you should be talking about. This is the heart of your brand because it's you. And when you talk about the things that you enjoy, those subjects where your passions lie, you don't have to scream and shout to get people's attention. You don't have to work as hard at it because you already have an entire library of you in your head. And you don't have to be a lying snake oil salesman or a scumbag to try to manipulate people into following you. You'll find your audience, especially after you publish your book. In the meantime, it may be slow going. You may not have thousands of followers, but if you're doing what you love, you should be having fun with it. If they enjoy your book, they're coming to get a look at you. They want to correlate your passions with your work. There's a lot being said in the world today about relearning. And that's because most of what we have come to believe has been passed on from people who we have come to believe are successful, who are good at making people believe that you need them in your life. In spite of being a shallow human being, this needs to be relearned indeed. And what was once common sense has given way to the senseless or the drama of personal wars against one another. What was once the truth has become an alternative version of the facts, and mostly an outright lie. How might the shift in the world today change the way things are marketed tomorrow? If marketing is forward thinking and selling is a product that is designed for a need that's on the horizon, does this not reflect the need for change and what is successful tomorrow? One thing that has never changed is that people need human interaction. They need heroes that represent the better part of our nature. When it comes to your passions and your skills, how does that relate to how you market yourself? I think the answer is pretty easy to see. That's what I've got for you today. I hope that you found some food for thought in this, and until next time, keep those keyboards clacking.